Hey guys, for those of you that haven't seen my videos before, my name's Lachelle. I'm one of the advocates here at the Avalon Center. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about a form of abuse that we see used quite often in domestic violence situations. It's extremely dangerous and severe, and that's strangulation. So often we hear people refer to strangulation as choking, and I kind of wanted to define what the difference between those two things are before we get started too much. Choking is actually when you have a foreign object that's caught in your windpipe and it kind of closes off your breathing from that way. We know what our clients mean when they say that their abuser choked them, so we know how to interpret that. But the actual term is called strangulation. And strangulation is basically when there's any type of force that is on the neck or the throat area that closes off that airflow and the blood vessels that run through the neck area. This can happen in a lot of different ways during an abusive episode. Abusers can use both of their hands to wrap around their victim's neck to close off those blood vessels and the airflow, or they can use their forearm to pin the person down by their neck or their throat, whether that's on the floor or up against a wall, whatever that might look like. Just any way that they can get that to be forceful and close those blood vessels and that airflow off. And also it can happen with, a piece of clothing or like a belt or anything that could be wrapped around that would cause that force to cut that off for you. So let's talk for a second about why abusers use strangulation in abusive relationships. Going back to the fact that domestic violence is all about power and control, what better way to show your power and control to someone other than to send a message to them that you control whether or not they take another breath? I mean, this would absolutely be extremely terrifying as a victim, and you would know in that moment that this person has the power to either kill you or to let you live. And abusers thrive on having that power and keeping their victims just enough afraid of them that they know if you don't do what I tell you to do, things could be really bad for you. And so what better way to do that than prove to them that, I let you live this time, next time I don't have to. Strangulation for sure increases the lethality of domestic violence situations. There's a very fine line between life and death when you are cutting off somebody's airways and cutting off those blood vessels. And so let's talk about that for a minute. Abusers may not even know where that cutoff line's at themselves. And so it's really one of those things where if you've been strangled and you've lived through it, you're probably pretty lucky that this person knew when to stop or that they just got lucky enough and stopped at the right time. It takes a very little force to cause permanent damage when you're strangling somebody and very little force to actually kill somebody when you're strangling them. So let's kind of put that into perspective. It takes 4.4 pounds of pressure for someone's jugular to be closed up when they're being strangled. So in relation to that, it only takes 4 to 6 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger on a gun. It's not a lot of pressure. It takes 11 pounds of pressure to close a person's carotid arteries while you're strangling them. In relation to that, it takes double that amount at 22 pounds to open a soda can. We all open soda cans. It's not that hard. It's just, you pull the soda tab up and it doesn't seem like you're exerting that much pressure. It takes half that much to close somebody's carotid arteries. It takes 30 pounds of pressure to close a person's trachea during strangulation. A good firm adult handshake can take anywhere from 50 to 80 pounds of pressure. So you can see how even when you're the person that's doing the strangulation, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. There's a very fine line between causing that damage and between really, really hurting somebody. And quite often, these people aren't educated enough as abusers to know what that cutoff limit is. And the bad thing with this is that with strangulation, sometimes it's hard to see those effects afterwards. And sometimes even our clients think that just because they lived through it and that they didn't die in that moment, that, they're okay and that they don't need to take any further action. So we're going to kind of talk about some of those effects and some of the risks that come along with being strangled. So some of the immediate effects of strangulation are happen within the first 3 minutes, and we'll kind of talk about those. During the first 5 to 10 seconds of being strangled, a person can lose consciousness. 11 to 17 seconds in, that person can start to experience seizure. 15 seconds in, that person can start to experience loss of their bladder control or urination. At 30 seconds, they can experience loss of bowel control or defecation. And at 2 minutes, that person can experience permanent brain damage. Now, anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes of being strangled, a person can die. So you think about that, 1 to 3 minutes. That is not a very long time. And if you don't know this timeline and you're strangling somebody, you could kill them and not necessarily have the intention behind it. Like you may not have meant to kill them. It happened because of what you were doing and because you didn't know when to stop. So nonetheless, it's extremely dangerous for the clients that we work with if strangulation is occurring in that relationship. So let's talk about some of the things that you might notice after being strangled. Visible injuries don't always show up in every strangulation case. In fact, it's only in about half of the cases that there will actually be visible signs of strangulation. And those that can make it really dangerous for victims because they don't have those physical symptoms and that visible sign. So they think that they're okay and that they don't need to seek medical care or that they don't need to do anything further to get help. Some of the visible signs might include petechia, which is like little red dots under the skin. It looks kind of like little blood blisters or something that are underneath the skin. And they can actually come up like around the eyes. They can come up behind the ears. You might even see them in different areas on the face, around the nose, around the mouth. And you can even see those on the inside of the mouth. And obviously on the neck and around the area where the strangulation might have occurred. And you know, the bruising is one of those things where you may have red marks and no bruising for the first day, but that's something that can progress over time. So I encourage that if you are a person that is being strangled in your relationship and you do think that you want to take steps or your abuser's been arrested and you're in the process of going to court, you know, take progressive photos of that. And what I mean by that is you can talk to one of the advocates at our office and we can help you with that. But what I mean by that is you may not have bruising today, but tomorrow it may get darker, and then the next day it may get darker. And so having that documentation might help you if you're in the court process and you're actually wanting to prosecute your abuser. I mean, obviously, you got to think about safety with that. If you're still in the home with the abuser, you may not want to be taking pictures and documentation of those things if the abuser is living there and could find them and it could increase your risk at home. Definitely work with an advocate on the safest way to document those things for you. There are also neurological signs to strangulation. Memory loss, behavior changes, you can have loss of sensation, extremity weaknesses, difficulty speaking, vomiting, dizziness, and headaches. All of those things can also occur. And then you can have voice or throat changes. And this is one of the ones that I would say is probably most common out of the people I've worked with is having like that raspy or that hoarse voice for a few days after that happens, or coughing, feeling the need to cough or clear your throat. Some people even talk about how I know I'm not sick, but it almost feels like I have strep because it hurts to swallow or there's pain swallowing. And so you can also see like inability to swallow, you can also see drooling as an effect of that as well. Breathing changes that can happen post-strangulation would include obvious difficulty breathing, respiratory distress, and then just the inability to catch your breath at all. And so a lot of times I think we focus on more of the physical things and the visible symptoms of these type of things, but really there's a long-term impact psychologically after strangulation as well. I actually have watched a webinar and they posted a video of this woman who was a survivor of domestic violence and her abuser often used strangulation. And she actually talked about in this video how he would just take her to the brink of dying every time or of losing consciousness. And she said that because of that, she remembered every time that he strangled her. She never had any of the memory loss that could be associated with it. And what that did to her is that even years and years later, if somebody come up behind her and kind of put their hands on her shoulder or if she had on like a scarf or tried to wear a necklace, that she would immediately be triggered and start to feel like she couldn't breathe. And so, you know, I think that a lot of times we tend to overlook those psychological things and the PTSD and the triggers and the long-term effects that that can cause. I believe in another video that I had seen, they even mentioned one of their kids coming up behind them and wrapping their arms around them. And, you know, in that immediate moment, them panicking and being triggered by that and thinking that they were in danger. And then there are also some delayed effects. There are some effects of strangulation that in that moment and even maybe for days later, you don't know exist. And it may happen to you after strangulation and you didn't even know that it was a result of that. So we'll talk about those for just a minute. Changes in mental status like restlessness, amnesia, psychosis, things of that nature. Miscarriage. If you're pregnant when you are strangled, you can actually experience miscarriage. This one can be immediate, but it can also happen within the few weeks after strangulation occurs. Stroke can occur after strangulation up to 3 to 6 months afterwards. And so, you know, think about it. If you're in an abusive relationship and you don't know about these things and you've been strangled and then you have a stroke a few months later, you might not know to tell your medical professional, hey, this is what I think caused this. And so obviously knowing things and being educated about them are very important. And then even death. Death can happen days, weeks, and up to months later. You can die from a massive stroke. You can die because your windpipe and the things in your neck are so swollen that they just continue to swell over time, and it can restrict that blood flow. It can restrict that breathing. And so those are kind of some of the delayed effects. So you can still die from strangulation, even if you don't die immediately from it. It can still cause issues that cause you to die later down the road. I hope that this has brought some light to you guys about strangulation. In our world of domestic violence, we do consider strangulation to be extremely lethal, and we do educate our clients on the lethality of that because we want them to understand that, hey, if this person is willing to strangle you and take your breath away from you, it's very likely that they could kill you. And these are not easy conversations to have with people because a lot of times I don't think that when you're in the middle of it, you kind of tend to minimize it and to try to tell yourself it's not as bad as what you think it is. But if you are in a domestic violence situation where strangulation is taking place, I urge you to consider the lethality of that situation and to think about, you know, your safety and what you can do to keep yourself safe in that situation. If you need help with that or would like to speak to an advocate about that, we have a crisis line that's available for you. 1-800-641-3434, and that is a 24/7 line. You can also reach out to us on our Facebook. You can message us there, and it's confidential as well, and we can message you back. Of course, you know, think about the safety that goes along with that. If you're in the home with your abuser and you're messaging us on Facebook, just make sure you're deleting those messages so that it doesn't increase the risk to your safety. And we also have a text-only line where you can text us. There are a lot of ways you can get in touch with us. So if you need our help, please do that. I appreciate you guys listening to the video. I hope that these videos are bringing education and awareness to you guys. And if anybody has any suggestions on video topics that you would like to see in the future, shoot us a message or comment on this video and let us know. Thank you.